The frost clung to steel like memory. December 27th, 1944. 3 kilometers west of Bastogne, Belgium, where the earth had been churned by treads and torn by shellfire, Oberfeldwebel Hans Dietrich crouched beside the tracks of a captured American tank, his breath forming clouds in the bitter cold. The M4 Sherman sat silent in the grey morning light, its olive drab paint scarred by combat, its turret still bearing the faint outline of an American star hastily painted over with German crosses. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dietrich's gloved fingers traced the suspension system, following the horizontal springs that connected paired road wheels in an arrangement he had never seen before. Behind him, 2 other crewmen from 2nd SS Panzer Division examined the turret mechanism, their faces showing confusion mixed with grudging respect. This Sherman had been captured intact 2 days earlier during the chaotic fighting around Manhay. Unlike the wrecked Shermans they usually encountered, this one had simply been abandoned when its crew ran out of ammunition, leaving it remarkably complete for examination. What troubled Dietrich most was not what the tank possessed, but what it revealed. His own Panther, now sitting 300 meters away near the tree line, represented German engineering at its finest. Heavier armor, more powerful gun, superior track design for soft terrain. Yet this American tank had crossed ground that morning where his Panther had struggled, had traversed its turret while moving at speeds his hydraulic system could not match, and had maintained operational readiness through conditions that left German vehicles broken down along icy roads. He stood, joints stiff from the cold, and looked toward the smoke rising from Bastogne. The Americans called this offensive the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans knew it as Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, Hitler's desperate gamble to split the Allied forces and buy time for the Reich. But here, in this frozen field, examining this unremarkable American tank, Dietrich felt the first stirrings of a realization that would reshape his understanding of armored warfare. The Sherman could outturn a Tiger. By late 1944, the Second World War had transformed into a brutal contest of industrial endurance and tactical innovation. Germany's early advantages in armored warfare, the lightning strikes through Poland and France, the sweeping victories across the steppes of Russia, had given way to grinding attritional combat on 2 massive fronts. The Wehrmacht faced enemies who had learned from defeat, who possessed industrial capacity that dwarfed German production, and who were steadily advancing toward the Reich from east and west. In this desperate context, German tank design had evolved toward extremes. The Panther medium tank, designed in response to the Soviet 34, boasted sloped armor and a high-velocity 75mm gun that could destroy most Allied tanks at ranges exceeding a kilometer. The Tiger heavy tank, with its 88mm gun and thick frontal armor, had achieved almost mythical status among both German crews and Allied soldiers. Its successor, the King Tiger, weighed 68 tons and mounted armor so thick that few Allied weapons could penetrate it from the front. These were formidable machines, representing the pinnacle of German engineering philosophy. Heavy armor, powerful guns, and sophisticated mechanical systems. German tank crews took pride in their equipment's superiority over individual Allied tanks. In head-to-head encounters at long range, a Panther or Tiger held decisive advantages over the American M4 Sherman. This superiority had been documented in countless after-action reports, celebrated in propaganda, and accepted as tactical gospel by crews on both sides. Yet Dietrich, examining the captured Sherman in that December cold, was beginning to see past the comfortable certainties of German armor doctrine. The Sherman he studied was not the standard model that had first appeared in North Africa in 1942. This was something newer, something American crews had begun receiving in December of 1944, just days before the German offensive began. The designation markings, partially obscured by mud, indicated M4A3E8, the technical designation for what American tankers called the Easy 8. The key difference lay in the suspension system before him. Earlier, Shermans had used vertical volute spring suspension, HVSS, a reliable but limited system with 12 road wheels arranged in 3 bogies per side. The Sherman before him mounted 16 road wheels in 4 bogies per side, connected by horizontal volute springs that distributed weight more evenly across wider tracks. The technical term was HVSS, horizontal volute spring suspension. But what mattered was not the terminology. What mattered was what this system allowed the tank to do. Dietrich had commanded Panthers since Kursk. He knew intimately the characteristics of German armoured vehicles, their strengths and their increasingly apparent weaknesses. The Panther's interleaved road wheel design provided excellent cross-country performance in many conditions, but those same overlapping wheels became death traps in mud and winter conditions. Ice and debris packed between the wheels, freezing solid overnight. Crews spent hours each morning with blowtorches and hammers, trying to free frozen road wheels before operations could begin. A single damaged wheel required removing half the suspension to replace it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Tiger's situation was even more challenging. Its hydraulic turret traverse system, dependent on engine speed, required the main engine running at specific RPM to function effectively. At low engine speeds, a full 360-degree rotation could take 77 seconds. Even at high speeds, under ideal conditions, a complete turret rotation required 19 seconds, and that depended on adequate fuel, proper hydraulic pressure, and functioning mechanical components, all increasingly rare commodities in German Panzer formations. By December 1944, the Sherman's suspension told a different story. Those horizontal springs absorbed impacts that would jar German torsion bar systems. The wider tracks distributed the tank's 33-ton weight across more surface area, reducing ground pressure below that of the heavier Panthers. Most significantly, individual road wheels could be replaced without removing entire bogie assemblies. American maintenance crews could perform track repairs in minutes that would take German recovery teams hours. But it was the turret that truly disturbed Dietrich's professional assessment. His crew had tested the traverse mechanism that morning. Full rotation, 15 seconds. Consistent, regardless of engine speed, powered by an auxiliary generator that functioned independent of the main engine. An American crew could rotate their turret while the tank was in motion, while traversing rough ground, while the main engine was idling to reduce noise. The gyrostabilizer, though American crews reportedly rarely used it to full effect, meant the gun could maintain relatively steady aim even over broken terrain, 15 seconds versus 77 seconds, 4-1. In combat, where the first shot often determined survival, that difference was measured in lives. The strategic situation surrounding Bastogne illustrated why this mattered. Hitler's Ardennes offensive had begun December 16th with the goal of capturing Antwerp, splitting Allied forces, and forcing a negotiated peace in the West. German planners had assembled substantial armoured reserves. Panthers, Tigers, and even rare King Tigers, supported by Volksgrenadier infantry divisions. Initial surprise was complete. Fog and snow grounded Allied aircraft, the terrain channeled American defenders into vulnerable positions, and German columns pushed deep into Allied lines. Yet by December 27th, when Dietrich examined this captured Sherman, the offensive was faltering. Not because of American firepower superiority, not because of overwhelming Allied numbers, though those would come. The offensive was failing because of mobility, endurance, and the grinding reality of mechanical warfare in winter conditions. German armoured columns, spearheaded by the sophisticated Panthers and Tigers that represented the peak of German engineering, found themselves unable to maintain operational tempo. Fuel shortages, ever present since Allied bombing had crippled German synthetic fuel production, meant tanks abandoned along roads when their consumption exceeded supply. Mechanical breakdowns, inevitable with complex systems operated under extreme conditions, left Panthers immobilized with frozen road wheels, broken final drives, and transmission failures. And then there were the Shermans. They kept moving. American tank battalions, despite taking heavy losses in initial German attacks, reformed and counterattacked. Supply trucks reached them with fuel, ammunition, spare parts. Damaged tanks were repaired in field workshops and returned to service within hours. The Easy Eights, with their improved suspension, crossed snow-covered fields where Panthers bogged down, negotiated icy slopes that Tigers couldn't climb, and maintained formation cohesion that German units could no longer achieve. Third Army, under General Patton, had executed a 90-degree pivot of 3 full divisions, moving over 100 miles through winter conditions to relieve Bastogne. The spearhead consisted of 4th Armoured Division's Combat Command R, including 37th Tank Battalion, equipped with a mix of standard Shermans and the newer Easy Eights. The relief column had fought through multiple German defensive positions, not through superior individual tank performance, but through relentless mobility and coordinated combined arms tactics. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding 37th Tank Battalion, would later report that the HVSS-equipped Shermans demonstrated remarkable advantages in the Ardennes fighting. They could traverse terrain that earlier Sherman variants found difficult. The wider tracks provided better flotation in snow. The improved suspension reduced crew fatigue during long movements, allowing tankers to arrive at battle positions less exhausted and more effective. Most importantly, in close-range engagements characteristic of the bocage and village fighting around Bastogne, the Sherman's faster turret traverse gave American crews decisive tactical advantages. German tanks, with their superior frontal armor and powerful guns, were optimized for long-range engagement, where they could exploit their strengths. In the close terrain of the Ardennes, where combat distances often measured in hundreds rather than thousands of meters, the ability to quickly engage multiple targets, to traverse the turret while moving, to maintain continuous fire during maneuver, proved more valuable than thick armor. Dietrich had seen this reality firsthand 2 days before, during the engagement that cost 2nd SS Panzer Division 6 Panthers and a Tiger. His battalion had established positions covering a crossroads near Manhay, expecting to ambush retreating American columns. Instead, a platoon of Easy Eights had approached through a wooded ravine, German intelligence considered impassable for armor. The Americans emerged 300 meters from the German position, traversing their turrets as they moved, firing on the run with enough accuracy to score hits. The German Panthers, engines idled to conserve fuel and reduce noise, needed 90 seconds to bring their turrets to bear, while simultaneously starting engines and building hydraulic pressure. In that interval, the Americans fired 17 rounds. 4 Panthers were hit before they could return effective fire. The engagement descended into chaos, with Panthers trying to maneuver while American Shermans darted between firing positions, using their superior agility to avoid German return fire while maintaining continuous pressure. Dietrich's Panther had survived by backing into defilade, using a stone building for cover while his driver coaxed the cold engine to operating temperature. By the time his hydraulics functioned properly, the Americans had withdrawn, leaving 2 destroyed Panthers burning and a third immobilized with track damage. The Tiger, theoretically invincible in frontal engagement, never fired a shot. Its turret traverse mechanism had frozen overnight, and the crew spent the battle trying to manually rotate 80 tons of steel and armament while American shells impacted around them. That battle, and dozens like it across the Ardennes, was teaching lessons German armor doctrine had not prepared for. Individual technical superiority mattered less than systemic reliability. Impressive specifications meant nothing if mechanical complexity prevented weapons from functioning in combat conditions. The heaviest armor provided no protection if mobility restrictions prevented reaching defensive positions before they were overrun. The Sherman's horizontal volute spring suspension represented a different engineering philosophy. Not the pursuit of maximum performance in specific categories, but the optimization of overall system effectiveness. Not the most powerful gun or the thickest armor, but a balanced design that prioritized reliability, maintainability, and sustained operational capability. It was the difference between a precision instrument and a field-serviceable tool, between a race car and a truck. In the grinding attrition of winter warfare, the tool outperformed the instrument. Dietrich straightened, his examination complete. The cold had seeped through his winter uniform, his fingers numb despite gloves. Around him, the Ardennes offensive was entering its final phase. German forces, unable to capture Bastogne, unable to reach the Meuse river crossings, unable to sustain offensive momentum against American reinforcements, were beginning a fighting withdrawal. The grand strategic gamble had failed. But here, in this frozen field beside a captured American tank, Dietrich had glimpsed a more profound truth. The Sherman's advantage was not technological breakthrough, it was systematic integration, the careful matching of capabilities to actual combat requirements. The Easy 8's HVSS suspension gave it mobility advantages in the specific terrain and conditions of late 1944 European combat. Its faster turret traverse enabled tactics that exploited German armor's weaknesses. Its mechanical simplicity meant it remained operational when more sophisticated German vehicles broke down. Most critically, it arrived in numbers. For every Easy 8 damaged or destroyed, 2 more appeared. American industrial capacity, that vast engine of production that had churned out over 50,000 Shermans total, meant that numerical superiority compounded tactical advantages. German crews, no matter how skilled, no matter how superior their individual tanks, faced an opponent who could absorb losses and return stronger, while German armor strength declined irreversibly with each engagement. This was the realization crystallizing in Dietrich's mind as he turned away from the captured Sherman, the realization that would haunt him through the retreat from the Ardennes, through the final desperate defense of Germany. Through the war's end months later, the Tiger could not outturn the Sherman. And in the Tiger Place Light, close-quarter battles of late-war armoured combat, the tank that could turn faster often survived while the heavier tank burned. The morning of January 3rd, 1945, brought clear skies and bitter cold to the snow-covered fields southeast of Bastogne. Oberfeldwebel Klaus Müller, gunner in a King Tiger of Heavy Tank Battalion 506, watched through his optics as a column of American tanks approached along the Bastogne-Arlon road. The engagement distance was approximately 800 meters, well within the lethal range of his 88mm gun. His commander, Hauptmann Werner Hoffmann, had positioned their 68-ton behemoth behind the ruins of a stone farmhouse, hull down with only the massive turret exposed. Hoffmann's voice crackled through the intercom, calm despite the tactical situation. Traverse left, Sherman formation, 4 vehicles, range 750 meters. Müller placed his hand on the traverse wheel, beginning the manual rotation as their engine idled to conserve fuel. The hydraulic system, dependent on engine RPM, provided only minimal power at their current engine speed. 15 degrees. 20. The long barrel of the KHK-43 gun swung slowly toward the target. 30 degrees. Then the lead Sherman did something unexpected. It accelerated directly toward them, tracks throwing snow as it picked up speed. 25 miles per hour over broken ground. The turret was traversing even as the tank moved, the gun tracking toward their position with mechanical precision. Müller felt sudden tension grip his chest. At their current traverse rate, they needed another 40 seconds to bring the gun to bear. The Sherman would cover 300 meters in that time. Engine speed up, Hoffmann ordered. Full hydraulic pressure. The driver increased RPM. The hydraulic system responded, but the turret rotation was still agonizingly slow compared to the Sherman's movement. 45 degrees. 50. The American tank was now 600 meters away, jinking slightly as it advanced, making range estimation difficult. Its turret completed a full rotation in the time the King Tiger traversed 60 degrees. Müller's loader, Gefreiter Paul Schneider, watched through his periscope with growing alarm. They're flanking. 2 more Shermans moving left through the tree line. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. The King Tiger, designed for long-range engagement, where its armor and firepower advantages were decisive, was being forced into a mobile close-quarters battle where those advantages diminished, while its weaknesses, slow traverse speed, and limited maneuverability became critical vulnerabilities. The lead Sherman reached 400 meters, its turret locked onto the King Tiger's position. Müller saw the muzzle flash, heard the impact of 76mm armor piercing rounds against their frontal armor. No penetration. The American gun lacked the power to pierce a King Tiger's frontal protection at this angle. But the Sherman wasn't trying to penetrate. It was fixing them in position, forcing them to respond, while its companions maneuvered for flanking shots. 60 degrees. 70. The King Tiger's turret continued its ponderous rotation. Another Sherman round impacted, this time against the turret front. Still no penetration. But each impact sent shock waves through the fighting compartment, disrupting aim, adding stress to a crew already operating at the edge of effectiveness. Hoffman's voice remained steady, but Müller detected the underlying tension. Target the lead vehicle. Prepare to fire on command. 80 degrees. Müller's crosshairs finally aligned with the approaching Sherman. Range now 350 meters. The American tank still advancing at speed, still traversing its turret to track their position. Schneider had already loaded an armor-piercing round. The breech closed, the gun ready. Target acquired. Müller reported. Fire, Hoffman ordered. The 88mm gun roared, its report deafening even through the crew's headphones. The long barrel recoiled, the shell crossing 350 meters in a fraction of a second. A direct hit on the Sherman's glacis plate, the frontal armor. At this range, with the King Tiger's powerful gun, penetration should have been certain. But the round impacted at an angle, the Sherman having turned slightly at the moment of firing. The shell deflected upward, leaving a deep gouge in the American tank's armor but failing to penetrate. Before Müller could adjust his aim, the Sherman returned fire. Not a single shot, but 3 rounds in rapid succession. The first struck their right track, the second hit the suspension, targeting the vulnerable interleaved road wheels that gave German tanks their excellent cross-country performance, but represented a critical weakness under combat conditions. The third penetrated the thinner side armor exposed when the King Tiger's turret rotated to engage the frontal threat. The penetration was catastrophic. The armor-piercing round entered the fighting compartment, its kinetic energy fragmenting internal components and igniting stored ammunition. Hoffman's last order was immediate and unambiguous. Bail out. Everyone out. Now. Schneider was already moving, climbing through the loader's hatch. Hoffman followed, then the driver and radio operator evacuating through the forward hull hatches. 5 men tumbling into the snow as their King Tiger, the most heavily armed and armoured tank in the German inventory, burned behind them. The engagement had lasted 90 seconds. The Sherman, theoretically inferior in every measurable category, armour, firepower, protection, had disabled a King Tiger through superior manoeuvrability and faster turret traverse. It had closed the engagement distance, where the German tank's advantages diminished, had forced a mobile combat situation where the King Tiger's slow traverse became a fatal liability, and had exploited the brief moment when side armour was exposed to deliver a killing shot. This pattern would repeat itself across the Ardennes and the subsequent Allied advance into Germany throughout January and February of 1945. Not in every engagement. German heavy tanks would continue to achieve impressive kill ratios in favourable conditions, long-range engagements where their firepower and armour advantages could be fully exploited. But in the close-quarter combat characteristic of village fighting, winter forests, and urban environments, the Sherman's mobility advantages proved decisive with increasing frequency. The HVSS suspension was central to this tactical advantage. American tank designers at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland had identified the problem as early as 1943. The original vertical volute spring suspension, adequate when the Sherman weighed 28 tons, struggled under increased combat weight as improved versions mounted heavier guns and additional armour. Track life decreased. Ground pressure increased. In muddy conditions, standard Shermans bogged down, where German Panthers could still manoeuvre. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Knox, who had experimented with horizontal volute springs on earlier light tank projects, proposed adapting a British suspension concept. The Horstmann suspension used horizontally mounted coil springs to link paired road wheels. Knox's innovation replaced the coil springs with volute springs, cone-shaped compression springs that compressed under load. When mounted horizontally, these springs created a suspension system where pressure on one wheel in a bogie was transmitted to the opposite wheel, maintaining track tension across the entire length. The engineering was elegant in its simplicity. 2 road wheels per bogie, mounted on paired arms, connected by horizontally positioned volute springs. When the front wheel encountered an obstacle, the spring compressed, transferring force to the rear wheel and maintaining track contact with the ground. The system doubled the number of road wheels from 12 to 16 while actually simplifying maintenance. Individual wheels could be replaced without removing entire bogie assemblies. Track tension remained consistent across varied terrain. Testing began in March of 1944 at Aberdeen Proving Ground. The results exceeded expectations. The new HVSS system, coupled with wider 23-inch tracks compared to the 16.6-inch tracks on earlier Shermans, reduced ground pressure to 11.5 pounds per square inch. This was lower than the Panther's 12.8 pounds per square inch, despite the Sherman's increased weight. Suspension travel increased, improving ride quality and cross-country speed. Shock absorbers mounted at the top of each bogie unit further smoothed the ride. Test drivers reported they could maintain 20 miles per hour over terrain that reduced standard HVSS Shermans to 12 miles per hour. But the real advantage emerged in gunnery tests. The smoother ride meant gun laying. The process of aiming and stabilizing the main gun remained more accurate during movement. The Sherman's existing gyrostabilizer, which attempted to keep the 76mm gun level in elevation, worked far more effectively when the tank wasn't pitching and rolling over rough ground. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Gunners could engage targets while moving at speeds that would make accurate fire impossible from a Panther or Tiger. This wasn't a minor improvement. It fundamentally changed the tactical calculus of tank versus tank combat. A Sherman crew could advance under fire, traverse the turret to track a target, and deliver accurate fire without stopping. A German crew had to halt, stabilize the tank, allow the hydraulic system to build pressure, and then aim. In the seconds required for these actions, an American crew might fire 3 or 4 rounds. Production of the M4A3E8, the designation indicating an M4A3 with the 8th experimental variant, which became the HVSS suspension, began in August of 1944. Detroit Tank, Arsenal and Fisher Body Division manufactured these improved Shermans at increasing rates through the final months of 1944. By December, when the German Ardennes offensive began, the first Easy 8s were arriving in Europe, distributed to units facing the strongest German counterattack of the war. The Battle of the Bulge provided the most comprehensive combat test of the HVSS Sherman against Germany's final armoured reserves. 4th Armoured Division, spearheading Patton's relief of Bastogne, received its first M4A3E8 tanks in late December. 37th Tank Battalion's after-action reports, compiled from daily operational summaries between December 23rd and January 7th, documented 63 engagements with German armour. 41 resulted in confirmed enemy vehicle destructions. 17 Panthers, 14 Panzer IVs, 7 Tigers, and 3 King Tigers. American losses during the same period: 9 M4A3E8 tanks knocked out, 6 of them subsequently repaired and returned to service. The kill ratio, when compared to earlier Sherman variants against the same targets in similar terrain, represented a dramatic improvement. More significantly, crew casualty rates in HVSS-equipped Shermans were lower than in standard models, suggesting that the improved mobility allowed crews to avoid situations where German firepower advantages were decisive. Tactical reports revealed why. American crews discovered they could use terrain that heavier German tanks avoided. The wide tracks and lower ground pressure allowed movement through snow depths that left Panthers floundering and Tigers immobile. In one engagement near Chaumont on January 2, 1945, a platoon of 4 Easy 8s used a wooded ravine approach considered impassable by German intelligence. They emerged 300 meters from a laager of 5 Panthers preparing for a counterattack. The Panthers, with engines idled to conserve fuel, needed 90 seconds to start engines, build hydraulic pressure, and bring turrets to bear. The Shermans, with their auxiliary generator-powered turret traverse, began engaging immediately. In 90 seconds, with all 4 Shermans firing, they delivered 27 rounds. All 5 Panthers were disabled before they could return effective fire. 3 were subsequently destroyed by flank shots. 2 were captured intact when their crews abandoned vehicles that had become death traps. This engagement illustrated several tactical principles that HVSS-equipped Sherman crews developed through combat experience. First, mobility could be weaponized. By approaching through terrain German commanders considered impassable, American units achieved surprise and positioned themselves for advantageous engagements. Second, rapid fire volume compensated for individual round effectiveness. While the Sherman's 76mm gun couldn't reliably penetrate a Panther's frontal armor, concentrated fire could disable tracks, damage suspension, and exploit the brief moments when side or rear armor was exposed. Third, turret traverse speed translated directly to combat effectiveness. German crews, even in superior tanks, required time to respond to threats. That time, measured in seconds, could mean the difference between firing first or dying first. The Sherman's 15-second full turret rotation, consistent regardless of engine speed or terrain conditions, gave American crews a decisive advantage in the chaotic, fast-paced engagements characteristic of the Ardennes fighting. The psychological impact on German crews was documented in multiple post-war interrogation reports. Panzer crews, who had grown accustomed to dominating individual tank duels through superior firepower and armor, found themselves outmaneuvered by tanks they had previously dismissed as inferior. The experience was disorienting and demoralizing. One captured Panther commander, interrogated by American intelligence officers in January 1945, described the sensation of helplessness when an EZ-8 flanked his position faster than his turret could traverse. "We saw them approaching." The report quoted him as saying, "We began traverse immediately, but they were faster. By the time our gun was aimed at where they had been, they were somewhere else, already firing at our side armor. It was like fighting ghosts. We could not pin them down long enough to use our advantages." This testimony, repeated in variations by other captured German armor crews, revealed a fundamental shift in tactical dynamics. The Panther and Tiger had been designed for specific combat conditions: open terrain, long engagement ranges, frontal confrontations where their armor and firepower advantages were decisive. The EZ-8, with its HVSS suspension and rapid turret traverse, was optimized for different conditions: close terrain, rapid maneuver, multi-axis engagements where mobility and rate of fire mattered more than individual shot power. The Ardennes, with its dense forests, narrow roads, and small villages, provided precisely the conditions where Sherman advantages flourished and German advantages diminished. German armor doctrine, developed on the vast expanses of the Eastern Front and refined through years of combat, emphasized strong defensive positions and long-range engagement. American doctrine, informed by industrial warfare principles and material superiority, emphasized mobility, combined arms coordination, and overwhelming an opponent through sustained pressure. The EZ-8 embodied American doctrine in mechanical form. It couldn't win every individual duel against a Panther or Tiger. It needed to maintain operational tempo, to keep moving forward despite resistance, to create situations where German advantages became irrelevant. In this mission, the HVSS suspension was not merely a technical improvement. It was a force multiplier that transformed the Sherman from an adequate tank into a platform capable of dictating the terms of engagement. By mid-January, as German forces withdrew from the Ardennes salient, the pattern was clear. HVSS-equipped Shermans, operating in combined arms teams with infantry, artillery, and air support, could maintain continuous offensive pressure that German armor could not counter effectively. Supply lines kept American tanks fueled and armed. Field maintenance restored damaged vehicles to service within hours. Overwhelming numerical superiority meant that losing even 3 Shermans to destroy 1 Panther was an acceptable exchange ratio for American commanders. The Germans had no comparable margin for attrition. Every Panther lost, every Tiger abandoned for mechanical failure, represented irreplaceable combat power. German tank production, disrupted by Allied bombing and starved of critical materials, could not replace losses. Fuel shortages meant that tanks sat immobile even when mechanically functional. The training pipeline for replacement crews had collapsed under the demands of multi-front warfare. By January 1945, many German panzer formations existed in name only. their paper strength bearing little resemblance to actual combat capability. The Sherman's persistence, its ability to absorb damage and continue fighting, to be rapidly repaired and returned to service, to arrive in numbers that made individual vehicle losses tactically insignificant, proved more valuable than the Panther's superior gun or the Tiger's impenetrable frontal armor. This was the harsh mathematics of industrial warfare, where production capacity and logistical sustainability mattered more than individual technical excellence. For the German tankers who examined captured EZ-8s during the Ardennes fighting, this reality was becoming impossible to ignore. The horizontal volute spring suspension represented more than improved mobility. It symbolized a different approach to armored warfare, one that prioritized system reliability over component performance, sustained operations over spectacular individual capabilities, and practical effectiveness over engineering perfection. Oberfeldwebel Dietrich, examining that first captured Sherman on December 27th, had glimpsed this truth. Oberfeldwebel Müller, bailing out of his burning King Tiger on January 3rd, learned it through direct experience. In the weeks that followed, as Allied forces advanced steadily eastward and German resistance crumbled under combined pressure from multiple fronts, thousands of other German tank crews would reach the same conclusion: the Sherman could outturn the Tiger. And in the close-quarter combat of Europe's final campaign, the ability to turn faster often mattered more than any other single factor. This was the collision with reality that would define the final months of armoured warfare in World War II. The spring thaw of 1945 brought mud and revelation to the roads leading into Germany. By March, the Ardennes had become history, remembered in frozen photographs and casualty lists. The Rhine had been crossed. German resistance, though still fierce in isolated pockets, was collapsing under the weight of combined Allied offensives from west and east. And in workshops, depots, and battlefield positions across the shrinking Reich, German tank crews confronted the final accounting of their profession. Hauptmann Werner Hoffmann, who had commanded the King Tiger destroyed near Bastogne on January 3rd, survived the war as a prisoner. His post-war interrogation by American intelligence officers, preserved in archives at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, provides insight into how German armor doctrine adapted, too late, to the reality of facing the HVSS Sherman. The interrogation transcript, dated June 12, 1945, captures his assessment with clinical precision. The American tank was inferior in direct comparison, Hoffmann stated. Our armor was thicker, our gun was more powerful. In ideal conditions, one Tiger could destroy 5 Shermans before they could effectively return fire. But ideal conditions existed only in our planning documents. In actual combat, especially in the final months, the Americans dictated the engagement conditions. They chose the terrain, the range, the timing. Their tanks moved through ground we considered impassable. They engaged from multiple directions simultaneously. Their turret traverse allowed them to shift targets faster than we could respond. He paused, according to the interrogator's notes, before continuing. Most significantly, they were always there. We would destroy 3, 4, 5 Shermans in an engagement. The next day, 10 more would appear. Our losses, even when favourable by ratio, were permanent. Theirs were temporary. This was the equation we could never solve. This testimony, repeated in variations by dozens of captured German armour officers, revealed the strategic bankruptcy of Germany's late-war tank development. The Tiger and Panther represented extraordinary individual capability, purchased at enormous cost in production resources, maintenance requirements, and fuel consumption. The Sherman, particularly in its HVSS-equipped variant, represented adequate capability, multiplied by overwhelming numbers, and sustained by superior logistics. The EZ-8's combat record through the final months of the European war documented this strategic advantage with brutal clarity. From January through May 1945, HVSS-equipped Sherman battalions participated in every major Allied offensive: the reduction of the Colmar pocket, the crossing of the Ruhr and Rhine rivers, the encirclement of the Ruhr, the advance into central Germany. In each campaign, their improved mobility and rapid turret traverse provided tactical advantages that German armour could not effectively counter. Statistical analysis compiled by Army Ordnance in the war's immediate aftermath revealed patterns that validated the HVSS concept. Average engagement ranges decreased as the war progressed. In North Africa, tank versus tank combat often occurred at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. In the Ardennes and subsequent German fighting, average engagement ranges dropped to 400 meters or less. At these shorter ranges, the Panther and Tiger's superior long-range accuracy became less relevant, while the Sherman's faster traverse and higher rate of fire became proportionally more valuable. Terrain analysis reinforced these findings. Germany's road network, village layout, and forested terrain favored mobile combat at close ranges. The HVSS Sherman's ability to traverse difficult ground, to maintain speed through mud and over debris, to rapidly shift firing positions, aligned perfectly with these conditions. German heavy tanks, optimized for different combat environments, found their advantages neutralized by geography and circumstance. The human cost of these technical differences appeared in casualty statistics. American tank crew survival rates improved markedly with the introduction of HVSS-equipped Shermans. Part of this improvement stemmed from the suspension system's enhanced mobility, allowing crews to avoid situations where German firepower advantages were decisive. Part came from better crew training and combined arms coordination. But part reflected a simple tactical reality. Tanks that could maneuver effectively were less likely to be hit, and crews in tanks that weren't hit didn't become casualties. German crew casualties, by contrast, accelerated through the war's final months, not primarily from combat, though fighting remained intense, but from the cascading failures of German military organization. Fuel shortages meant crews abandoned functional tanks. Supply disruptions left formations immobile and vulnerable to air attack. The collapse of the training system meant replacement crews arrived with inadequate preparation. Experienced crews, the backbone of German armour effectiveness, were ground down by attrition that could not be replaced. Oberfeldwebel Klaus Müller, whose King Tiger was destroyed on January 3rd, survived to witness Germany's surrender in May. His personal diary, discovered decades later and donated to the German Tank Museum in Munster, provides a ground-level perspective on armour warfare's final phase. The entry dated March 28, 1945, written in pencil on salvaged paper, captures the psychological erosion affecting German panzer forces. Assigned to new crew today, Panzer IV, not Tiger. No fuel for heavy tanks. New crew is boys, 16 and 17 years old. They know nothing. Yesterday we engaged American column, 2 Shermans, infantry, trucks. We scored 1 hit before our transmission failed. Americans bypassed us, did not even stop to finish the kill. We are not worth their ammunition anymore. This is what it has come to. We wait in positions we cannot leave, fighting opponents who barely notice we exist. This sense of irrelevance, of being bypassed by history, pervaded German armour forces in the war's closing weeks. The mighty Panthers and Tigers, once symbols of German military superiority, had become isolated strongpoints in a defensive network that was collapsing faster than individual tactical victories could prevent. The Shermans, particularly the Easy 8s with their improved mobility, simply went around German defensive positions when direct engagement was tactically unfavourable. American operational doctrine, informed by overwhelming material superiority, didn't require destroying every German tank. It required maintaining offensive momentum, keeping German forces off balance, preventing them from establishing coherent defensive lines. The HVSS Sherman's reliability and mobility made this doctrine practical. Columns could advance rapidly, bypass resistance, cut supply lines, and continue moving while follow-on forces reduced isolated German positions. The final statistics tell the story with numerical precision. From December 1944 through May 1945, American forces in Europe received approximately 4,000 HVSS-equipped Shermans. These represented less than 10% of total Sherman strength, but participated in a disproportionate number of successful engagements. Their mechanical reliability, with operational readiness rates consistently above 85%, far exceeded German armour availability by war's end. German armour strength, by contrast, collapsed under combined pressure. In December 1944, German forces on the Western Front fielded approximately 1,200 tanks and assault guns. By May 1945, organised panzer formations had effectively ceased to exist. Hundreds of tanks were abandoned for lack of fuel. Hundreds more were destroyed by air attack while immobilised by mechanical failure. The remainder were lost in combat or deliberately destroyed to prevent capture. The kill ratios, so favourable to German armour in earlier war years, became meaningless when German tanks couldn't reach the battlefield or couldn't manoeuvre once engaged. A Panzer with an empty fuel tank had zero combat effectiveness, regardless of its superior gun and armour. A Tiger immobilised by transmission failure contributed nothing to defence, regardless of its theoretical lethality. The Sherman, with its simpler mechanical design and assured fuel supply, was present, functional, and fighting. The broader strategic implications extended beyond individual battles. The HVSS suspension demonstrated that incremental improvements to proven designs could yield significant tactical advantages without the development time and production disruption of entirely new vehicle designs. American tank development continued through the war, resulting in the M26 Pershing heavy tank, but the Pershing arrived too late and in too few numbers to significantly impact the European campaign. The Easy 8, an upgrade to an existing design, provided immediate benefit to forces already engaged in combat. This approach, evolutionary improvement rather than revolutionary replacement, reflected American industrial philosophy. Mass production of proven designs, with continuous incremental enhancements, generated more combat power than limited production of sophisticated designs that required extensive development time. The Sherman platform, adaptable and mature, absorbed improvements like the HVSS suspension without disrupting production lines or requiring complete crew retraining. German tank development, by contrast, pursued increasingly sophisticated designs at enormous cost. Resources devoted to producing limited numbers of Tigers and Panthers might have generated greater combat power if applied to larger numbers of simpler, more reliable vehicles. But German military culture, emphasizing technical excellence and individual system superiority, drove development toward complexity and capability rather than reliability and numbers. The HVSS Sherman's success challenged this paradigm. It proved that practical engineering, focused on solving specific tactical problems with proven technology, could deliver better combat results than pursuing maximum technical capability. The horizontal volute spring suspension wasn't revolutionary. British designers had explored similar concepts. The principles were well understood. What made it effective was thoughtful application to solve real problems: inadequate mobility in mud, rough ride, degrading accuracy, difficult field maintenance, insufficient track life. The legacy of the Easy 8 extended far beyond World War II's conclusion. The suspension system, designed for European conditions in 1944, worked equally well in Korean mountains and Israeli deserts. Sherman tanks with HVSS remained in frontline service through the Korean War, where their reliability and mobility proved as valuable as they had in Germany. Israeli forces operated HVSS Shermans into the 1960s, appreciating their mechanical simplicity and ease of maintenance. This longevity validated the design philosophy underlying the HVSS concept. Good engineering transcends its original context. Solutions that address fundamental problems, rather than pursuing specifications for their own sake, remain relevant across changing conditions. The Easy 8 succeeded not because it was the best tank on paper, but because it worked reliably in actual combat conditions. For the men who crewed these tanks, the technical specifications mattered less than lived experience. Staff Sergeant William McBride, whose engagement near Bastogne opened our narrative, survived the war and returned home in October 1945. His memoir, deposited with the National Archives in 1992, includes reflections that capture the crew perspective on their equipment. "People ask me about the Sherman," McBride wrote. "They've read it was a death trap, inferior to German tanks. That wasn't my experience. My tank worked. Every day it started, moved, and fought. The new suspension we got in December made a huge difference. We could go places earlier Shermans couldn't manage. I saw plenty of knocked-out Panthers and Tigers sitting by roads, not from combat damage but mechanical failure. I never saw that with our tanks. When we hit something, mechanics fixed it and we got back in the fight. The Germans couldn't do that by the end. They had better tanks on paper, we had better tanks in reality. This testimony, echoed by thousands of other American tankers, captured an essential truth. Wars are won not by perfect weapons, but by adequate weapons available in sufficient quantities, operated by well-trained crews, supported by overwhelming logistics, and employed according to sound tactical doctrine. The EZ-8 embodied all these factors. Its suspension system, a seemingly technical detail, created tactical advantages that crews exploited to overcome opponents whose equipment specifications suggested they should have dominated the battlefield. The strategic lesson proved enduring. Military effectiveness depends less on individual weapon superiority than on systematic advantages in training, logistics, production, and tactical doctrine. The nation that fields adequate equipment reliably in overwhelming numbers, supported by comprehensive logistics and operated by well-trained personnel, defeats the nation that produces sophisticated equipment it cannot maintain, supply, or use effectively. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe. The German Panzer crews who examined the Sherman's HVSS suspension in those frozen fields of December 1944 learned this lesson through direct experience. Some, like Oberfeldwebel Dietrich and Hauptmann Hoffmann, survived to share their insights with post-war historians. Others died defending a Reich that their technical excellence could not save. All witnessed the transformation of armoured warfare from a contest of individual tank capability to a test of industrial systems and operational sustainability. The EZ-8 represented the future, reliable, maintainable, produced in numbers, and optimized for real combat conditions rather than theoretical maximums. Its turret traversed faster than a Tiger's, not through revolutionary technology but through thoughtful integration of proven systems. Its suspension allowed accurate fire, while moving not through complex innovation but through careful matching of mechanical components to tactical requirements. Its operational availability remained high, not because American steel was superior, but because American design philosophy prioritized reliability over peak performance. These advantages, emerging from a suspension system designed to solve specific mobility problems, proved decisive in the grinding attritional warfare that characterized World War II's final months. The 68-ton King Tiger, theoretically invincible, couldn't rotate its turret fast enough to track a Sherman moving at speed across broken ground. It couldn't traverse terrain that the lighter, wider-tracked Sherman navigated easily. It couldn't maintain operational tempo when mechanical complexity demanded constant maintenance that German logistics could no longer provide. When Staff Sergeant McBride's EZ-8 engaged that King Tiger near Bastogne on January 3, 1945, the outcome was determined not by armour thickness or gun calibre but by the ability to move, traverse, and fire effectively under combat conditions. The HVSS suspension provided that ability. American tank crews exploited it. German tank forces, hobbled by mechanical unreliability, fuel shortages, and tactical inflexibility, could not respond effectively. In the end, the Sherman with horizontal volute spring suspension stands as proof that wars are won not by wonder weapons, but by sound engineering, industrial excellence, and tactical doctrine that exploits systematic advantages. The EZ-8 wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was adequate, reliable, and available in numbers that Germany could not match. That combination proved sufficient to help win the largest war in human history, one frozen field and one faster turret traverse at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.